Have you ever been called a burden by your own child? It's a word that slices deeper than any knife because it comes from the very heart you helped shape. 2 weeks ago, my daughter looked me straight in the eye and told me I was holding her back, weighing her down. My world shattered in that moment. But life has a strange way of turning tables. Just 14 days later, she needed me more than ever. Stay with me. This is our story. I never thought those words would ever come from her mouth. Not from the little girl I once cradled in my arms. Not from the teenager I cheered for at every school concert. Not from the young woman I sacrificed sleep money and pieces of my own dreams to support. But that evening, as we sat in her living room, the sentence left her lips as if it carried no weight at all. "Mom, you're becoming a burden." The room fell silent. Her voice was steady, almost casual, but my world tilted in that instant. My hands froze on the cup of tea I was holding. I wanted to believe I had misheard her, that perhaps she had said something else, softer, less cruel. But when I looked at her eyes, restless, a little cold, filled with impatience, I knew I had not imagined it. She shifted in her seat, sighed heavily, and continued speaking. "Mom, I've got so much going on already. The kids, my job, the bills. I can't keep worrying about whether you're okay or driving you everywhere you need to go. I can't carry all of this anymore." Each word piled on my chest like stones. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to remind her of all the nights I stayed awake rocking her to sleep, of the mornings I worked double shifts so she could have new shoes, of the times I went without so she could have more. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to keep the tears from spilling. The cup rattled slightly in my trembling hands. I forced myself to smile, a weak, broken thing, and whispered, "I understand." Those words were a lie. I didn't understand at all. When I got home that night, the silence of the house pressed against me like a heavy fog. Every corner carried echoes of the life I had once lived. Her laughter as a child, her footsteps racing down the hallway, the sound of her voice calling, "Mom!" whenever she needed me. And now she had told me I was too much, that my presence weighed her down. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not gentle tears, but sobs that shook my body, sobs that left me gasping for air. Because nothing hurts more than being told by your own child, the one you carried, the one you gave everything for, that you are no longer wanted. I thought about every stage of her life, the scraped knees I bandaged, the nights I stayed awake waiting for her to come home safe, the way she leaned on me when her first relationship fell apart, when she thought her world was ending. Had all of that been erased? Forgotten? The words "you're a burden" replayed in my head like a cruel echo. I wondered if maybe she was right. I was older now, slower. My joints ached. My memory sometimes slipped. Maybe I really had become too much for her, but another part of me rebelled against that thought. No, I am not useless. I still have love to give, wisdom to share, strength inside me. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not call her. I would not ask for help. If she believed I was a burden, then I would learn to carry my weight in silence. What I didn't know was that life was already setting the stage for a moment that would shake both of us and force her to see me, not as a burden, but as the mother she still needed. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I didn't call her. She didn't call me. The phone sat on the counter like an unwelcome reminder, its stillness almost louder than a ring could ever be. Each morning I tried to busy myself. I watered the plants. I folded laundry that didn't really need folding. I even baked bread, though my appetite had vanished. Outwardly, I looked occupied. Inwardly, loneliness gnawed at me like a quiet hunger. The truth is, I missed her. I missed the way she used to stop by with the kids, her laughter spilling into my quiet house. I missed the sound of my grandchildren running down the hallway, chasing each other until they collapsed into my lap, giggling. But pride is a stubborn companion. Her words echoed in my mind. "You're a burden." I told myself, if that's how she feels, then I won't intrude. I won't give her the chance to say it again. So I stayed quiet. The evening stretched longer. I'd make myself a small dinner and sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The world outside kept moving, but my own felt frozen. Sometimes I reached for a pen and a notebook, thinking I'd write her a letter, maybe explain how much those words had wounded me. But every time the tears blurred the page before I wrote more than a line, I'd crumple the paper and toss it away. Nights were the hardest. The silence in the house seemed to expand after dark, filling every corner. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her words over and over. "You're a burden." It became a cruel lullaby that stole my sleep. Still, I clung to the promise I had made myself. I wouldn't reach out. She wanted space, and I would give her that. And then, exactly 2 weeks later, the silence broke. The phone rang. I froze, staring at it as if it were a stranger knocking at my door. My hands trembled when I picked it up. It was her. Her voice was different, shaking, fragile, nothing like the sharpness I'd heard that day in her living room. "Mom," she whispered, and in that single word I could hear the weight of something heavy. I swallowed hard, bracing myself. "Yes, honey?" There was a pause, then 3 words that pierced through the hurt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Mom, I need you." Her voice cracked as she said it, and in that instant, all my resolve melted away. My heart ached with a mix of relief and fear. She needed me. After weeks of silence, after words that had nearly broken me, she was reaching out. I didn't ask for details. I didn't demand apologies. I just said softly, "I'll be right there." I hung up the phone, grabbed my coat, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt purpose rush back into my veins. Whatever had happened, whatever storm she was caught in, I knew one thing for certain. My daughter needed her mother again. When I arrived at her house, I found her standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, eyes swollen from crying, shoulders sagging under a weight far too heavy for her age. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, as if all the strength drained out of her at once, she collapsed into my arms. I held her tightly, my own tears threatening to spill. The same daughter who had once told me I was a burden was now trembling against me, whispering words that shattered my heart. "Mom, I don't know what to do." Between sobs, she told me everything. Her husband had been in a car accident. A truck had run a red light. The impact crushed his leg, broke his ribs, and left him in the hospital facing multiple surgeries. He was alive, thank God, but the doctor said recovery would take months. He would be unable to work, unable to walk without help for a long time. She was terrified, overwhelmed. The kids were confused and scared. Bills piled up on this counter. She hadn't eaten in days, too busy shuttling between the hospital, home, and the children's needs. Her voice cracked as she confessed, "Mom, I can't hold it all together. I need you." I didn't hesitate. I didn't remind her of her harsh words. I didn't ask why it had taken a crisis for her to see my worth again. I simply stepped inside and began doing what mothers have always done. I took care of my child. That evening, I cooked dinner for the kids. The familiar smell of soup filled the kitchen, and for the first time in days, they smiled. I tucked them into bed, kissed their foreheads, and promised them their daddy would be okay. Later, I sat beside my daughter at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she held her cup of coffee. I reached across and covered her hands with mine. "You're not alone," I whispered. "We'll get through this together." Her eyes welled with tears, and she nodded silently. In the days that followed, I became the steady rhythm in their chaos. I packed lunches in the morning, drove the kids to school, and checked homework at night. I visited her husband in the hospital. Holding his hand when she needed to rest, I washed dishes, folded laundry, paid bills, and kept the house running so she could focus on what mattered most, her family's healing. Every evening I sat with her at the hospital, reminding her to eat, to breathe, to rest. I listened when she needed to cry. I reassured her when fear crept in, and slowly I saw her eyes soften again. Not with pity, not with frustration, but with gratitude. One night after we returned from the hospital, she looked at me across the kitchen table. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Mom, I don't know what I would do without you." In that moment, the words she had spoken 2 weeks earlier seemed to vanish into thin air. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a weight dragging her down. I was the anchor holding her steady. Well, the storm raged around her, and though my heart still carried the scar of her earlier words, I realized something powerful. Sometimes it takes life falling apart for us to see the people who truly hold us together. The days began to blend together, each one carrying the same rhythm. Morning light filtering through the curtains, children's voices calling out as they rushed to get ready for school. The hum of life continuing even while a shadow of worry lingered over the household. And there I was, moving quietly, steadily, filling the gaps my daughter couldn't manage. I packed lunches, tying little notes of encouragement to slip inside the bags. I drove the kids to school, waving at them until they disappeared through the doors. I returned home to fold laundry, vacuum the carpets, and prepare dinner before heading to the hospital. At the hospital, I would sit by her husband's side, offering comfort when he winced in pain, speaking softly so he wouldn't feel alone. I listened carefully as doctors explained procedures, then repeated the words more gently to my daughter, making sure she understood. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the kind of thing people post proudly on social media. But it mattered. Every little act became a brick holding their fragile world together. And slowly, though, my daughter began to look at me differently. At first, it was just a glance, a softened gaze when she saw me, tucking her kids in. Then it was the way her voice gentled when she asked me if I was tired. But the moment that pierced through me came late one evening. I was standing at the sink, washing dishes. The warm water soothed my aching hands, and I hummed softly to myself, trying to keep my spirits lifted. Suddenly, I felt her presence behind me. "Mom," she said quietly. I turned, a little startled. She stood there, eyes glistening, her lips trembling as if she wasn't sure how to begin. Then, in a voice that cracked with emotion, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I froze, dish in hand, heart pounding.
"I never should have said what I said," she continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're not a burden."
"You never were. You're my anchor, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her words broke something inside me, but in the best possible way. All the pain I had been carrying, all the hurt from that one cruel sentence began to ease. It didn't vanish entirely, scars never do, but it loosened its grip on me. I put the dish down, dried my hands, and embraced her. She sobbed against my shoulder like the little girl I used to comfort after nightmares. I stroked her hair and whispered, "I love you. That's all that's ever mattered." In that moment, I realized something powerful. Yes, words can wound us. They can scar deeply, especially when they come from the ones we love most. But love itself has a way of mending what seems broken beyond repair. Over the next days, I saw the shift in her. She thanked me more often. She leaned on me without shame. She no longer looked at me with frustration, but with respect. Recognition of the strength I still carried, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Purpose. I wasn't a shadow in her life. I wasn't someone taking up space. I was a mother, needed, valued, and loved. Sometimes it takes the darkest storms for us to rediscover our place in the hearts of those we hold dearest. Looking back now, I can see how those weeks changed everything, for her, for me, and for the bond between us. Her words, the ones that had wounded me so deeply, were not the end of our relationship. They were a painful crack, yes, but sometimes a crack lets the light in. I learned something about myself. I learned that even when people dismiss you, even when they say you're a burden, your worth does not vanish. I still had strength. I still had wisdom. And most importantly, I still had love to give. Love doesn't disappear just because it isn't recognized. Love stays, waiting, steady as the earth beneath our feet. For my daughter, the lesson was different. She discovered that parents are not disposable. We don't stop being necessary just because our children grow older, or because we slow down with age. The same hands that once carried them through storms can still steady them when new storms arrive. She admitted later that she had been overwhelmed long before the accident. Work was exhausting. The kids' needs constant, the bills relentless. In her exhaustion, she lashed out at the one person she thought would never walk away, me. And she was right. I didn't walk away. But the crisis forced her to see what she had forgotten. That I wasn't extra weight dragging her down. I was a pillar, holding her up. Through those long hospital visits, through late-night dinners and school drop-offs, through the countless small acts that kept her life from unraveling, became more than just mom again. I became her partner, her safe place, her steady ground. And slowly I saw the gratitude in her eyes turn into something more enduring, respect. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed and her husband was finally resting more comfortably, we sat together in the quiet living room. She turned to me and said, "Mom, I see you differently now. I see everything you've always done, everything you still do. I don't know why I ever thought you were a burden." Her voice cracked, and tears slid down her face. She took my hand and held it tightly, like she was afraid to let go. I smiled through my own tears. "It's okay," I whispered. "Sometimes we forget, but love always finds its way back." That moment sealed something between us, a new understanding, a deeper bond. Yes, the pain of her earlier words remained in my memory, but instead of bitterness, I felt gratitude. Because without that pain, maybe we never would have reached this place of truth. Now, whenever I look at her, I don't see the daughter who once called me a burden. I see a woman who learned a hard lesson, who grew through her mistakes, and who now values me more than ever. And I know this. One day, her own children may push her away, may say things in frustration that cut deep. And when that day comes, she will remember me. She will remember the lesson life carved into both our hearts. That family is not about convenience. It's about love, endurance, and the courage to show up even when it hurts. In the end, the pain gave way to something stronger. Not resentment, not regret, but renewal. Today, when my daughter looks at me, it is no longer with impatience or frustration. It is with gratitude, with love. She knows now I was never a burden. I was, and always will be, her mother. Sometimes life has to shake us hard before we see the people who've been holding us steady all along. Words can wound, yes, but love has the power to heal even the deepest cuts. So if you've ever been told you're in the way, remember this. Your presence carries more weight than you realize. And one day, the very people who forgot your worth may discover they cannot stand without you. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories of love, strength, and second chances.